Shalom and welcome to the One Pusik podcast, in which three rabbis from Englewood, New Jersey, each share an insight on one particular pusik from the Parsha, and reflect on each other's ideas. Rabbinic banter, I like to call it. I am Rabbi Chaim Pupko of Congregation Ava Torah, and I'm joined by my dear friends and colleagues,
Rabbi Akiva Block, Kilat Kesher,
and Rabbi Daniel Goldberg, Eitz Chaim, the Englewood Stiebel.
To sponsor an episode of the One Pusik podcast, visit onepussikpodcast.com and click on the sponsorship link. And please take a moment and give us a 5-star rating on your podcast platform.
Welcome, everyone, to this pre-Shavuot edition of the One Pusik podcast. As we get ready to celebrate Zman Matan Toratenu, the holiday of Shavuot, we have a special pre-Shavuos edition of the One Pusik podcast where we're going to share reflections on a pusuk related to the holiday of Shavuot. But before we get to that, perhaps somewhat related, we're recording this podcast on Thursday, May 14th, Erev Yom Yerushalayim. And it just so happens that in celebration of the 250-year anniversary of the United States of America, 250 years since the Declaration of Independence in 1776, President Trump, in honor of Jewish American Heritage Month, proclaimed that, I'll just read from his proclamation, throughout this historic year, we rejoice in the triumph of the American spirit and rededicate ourselves to the cause of liberty and justice for all. In special honor of 250 glorious years of American independence, and on the weekend of Rededicate 250, a national jubilee of prayer, praise, and thanksgiving, Jewish Americans are encouraged to observe a national Sabbath. From sundown on May 15th, that's tomorrow night, to nightfall on May 16th, friends, families, and communities of all backgrounds may come together in gratitude for our great nation. This day will recognize the sacred Jewish tradition of setting aside time for rest, reflection, and gratitude to the Almighty. I found this to be remarkable and fascinating, and I just want to hear from the rabbis what your take, what your instinctive response to this is. Is this a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is it just strange? What do you think?
One thing I realize is that it's a good reminder that Shabbos is not just Zecher L'Maaseh Bereishis. As we say in Kiddush, Shabbos is a remembrance of Bereishis, of how Hashem created the world and rested on the seventh day. But it's a good reminder that Shabbos is also Zecher L'Tzias Mitzrayim, that it is in remembrance of freedom, not just freedom from work, but freedom from bondage. And I think it's that aspect of Shabbos that's highlighted by a proclamation like this, because it's clearly connecting to the fact that this country was founded on religious liberty, and we are able to observe Shabbos the way that we want. And so in that sense, I think there's definitely something to learn or be reminded of in this proclamation.
It's touching, first and foremost, at a time when obviously we feel very embattled and vulnerable, to feel very seen and appreciated. And for the president to do this and highlight the contribution of the Jewish people to the founding and the character of America is so meaningful. And yeah, I'm touched. That's it. I just feel touched.
I probably should have said this at the outset. My interest in this conversation has nothing to do with the political aspect or element of it. It matters not very much to me, for the purposes of this conversation, what people think of the president. I'm really just in terms, from the perspective of our attitude to Shabbos is really the more interesting. In terms of how Jews relate to and observe Shabbos, is this the kind of thing that we would embrace? Is this the kind of thing that maybe would give us pause to have voices from the outside tell us, oh, you really should keep a national day of Shabbos? Just such an interesting, for me, my initial thing is Shabbos, like so much of, and this is I guess a good segue to what we're going to talk about in terms of Shavuos, but Shabbos is one of these things that our observance of Shabbos together is meant to bring us together. And Chazal teach that if all of Am Yisrael were to keep a Shabbos, then the Geula would come maybe 2 Shabboses. Some Amar Chazal say 1 Shabbos, some say 2 Shabboses. But really, it is that core, that center around which we unite. And what I find so fascinating is it's not a call to the country to observe it. It's a call to the Jewish people. I hereby declare Jewish Americans are encouraged to observe a national Sabbath. It just reinforces for us, the idea that Shabbos is, like Rabbi Pupko said, is something that is uniquely Jewish. Matana tova yesh li bebeit genazai, the Gemara in Shabbos says, Hashem says that I have this precious treasure in my storehouse, in my treasure house. I'm going to give it to the Jewish people. V'ani mevakesh litno liYisrael. I want to give that present to the Jewish people. We so often are exporters of good ideas to the world, and Shabbos is one of those ideas. Shabbos is all the rage now, even in non-Jewish circles, about taking a Sabbath, turning off your phone. Charlie Kirk published a book on the Sabbath. That was his last book that he published about the Sabbath. So it's definitely this broader, more cultural idea, but Shabbos at its core really is something that was uniquely Jewish and countercultural, and even voices from the outside telling us Shabbos is for the Jews, and the Jews should keep Shabbos, I think is a very, really interesting and important reminder.
That further reinforces what I was saying, because when you look at those two aspects of Shabbos, Shabbos of creation versus Shabbos of the Exodus, so Shabbos of Yetzias Mitzrayim is the one that is unique and personal to the Jewish people. And then there's the aspect of Shabbos that's more universal, right? The Shabbos of creation. I remember learning, one of the Rishonim explains the Gezerah of Amir La'akum, that you're not allowed to ask a non-Jew to do a malacha for you, which is, the reason primarily is because it degrades Shabbos. But one of the Rishonim suggests also is that because they also have a chelik in Shabbos, right? Shabbos has a universal aspect in that it's Zeichel L'Maaseh Bereishis, creation, which everyone should celebrate. And so that's another reason why they shouldn't do malacha either.
For me, again, for me, it's like a warm hug. I think it's just at a time when the Jewish people need a warm hug. I don't think anyone's going to keep Shabbos because of this. Maybe some people will not keep Shabbos because President Trump told you to keep Shabbos, so then you have to not keep Shabbos. So there, it might have the inverse effect. But I'll say the following, and that is that the model, if you go to many blank heritage museums, including Jewish heritage museums sometimes, the narrative is we were foreigners, then we developed, we built, and we became Americans. And the happy ending of the museum, as it takes you through the journey of a people coming to a place, is that we end up losing our particularity and identity and just becoming wonderful Americans or wonderful whatever country you're in. And I think it's something very, very beautiful that the president here is reinforcing particularism, that we want you to be a great American is not to forfeit your Jewishness. It is to be fully Jewish. And that you, as Jews who are Jewish and practicing your Judaism, that is what enables you to make the greatest contribution to America. And I think that's very unique. I don't think this is the kind of message you would get in many countries. Go and be particularly Jewish, as opposed to abandon your Jewishness. So it's something maybe we even just take for granted, but it is really a unique hallmark of the golden Medina and the Medina Shel Chesed that we live in.
Yeah, adhere to your traditions.
Yeah.
It's not just that you can still be good Americans, but in a proclamation about America at 250, there's a call to be who you're meant to be who you're supposed to be, who you've always been.
Okay. All right. Rabbi Block, set up the pasuk for us for this week.
As the Jewish people leave Mitzrayim, and after a journey of a number of weeks through the desert, they arrive at Har Sinai. The Torah says, Perek Yotes Pasuk Beis, Vayisu Merfidim, Vayavo Midbar Sinai. They journeyed from Refidim, and Vayavo Midbar Sinai, they entered the wilderness of Sinai, Vayachanu Bamidbar, and they encamped in the wilderness, Vayichan Sham Yisrael Neged Ahar, and Israel encamped there in front of the mountain. And one of the most celebrated and oft-cited Ma'amarei Chazal, cited here by Rashi, Vayichan in the singular as opposed to the plural. Rabbis, what do you have to say?
And sung so beautifully by Sruli Williger.
I think it was Shlomi Dex.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Well, that's going out.
I like the outtakes.
Yeah.
I actually was struck by the continuation of that Rashi as I was looking at this pasuk and thinking about what to discuss. It says, Ki ish echad b'lev echad, quoting the Mechilta. Aval, it says, but shar kol hachanios, but every other place that they camped, it was filled with fighting and machlokes. So this Ki ish echad b'lev echad, this vaunted moment of unity and unification, it was a total anomaly, even for the Jewish people in the Midbar. And it's been pretty much a total anomaly for the rest of Jewish history. And I think that we are right to be chasing Ki ish echad b'lev echad. We want to be moving in that direction as best we can. But to me, the disunity that we almost always experience, is not so much a bug as it is a feature of the Jewish people, because Hashem wants the Jewish people to be different machanes. Hashem could have made us all just one homogenous group of people, but he created different shvatim and different camps because people are different and communities are different. And in that difference, every community has something to bring to the conversation, something to bring to the Jewish people. And we actually need all of those differences, right? I have this thought experiment where I say, if all the Jewish people were this machane, were Hasidish, if all the Jewish people were modern Orthodox, if all the Jewish people were Kardal, whatever it is, would we be better off? And I think the answer is no. I think that we're actually much enriched by having different schools and different shvatim today. But what that automatically means is that there's going to be conflict, meaning it's impossible that we should have difference and not conflict. What we need to do, though, if we are consigned to always having conflict because Hashem wants us to be different and celebrates our differences, and everyone brings something different to the table, then our job is not to try and squash that, and there should be uniformity, and it should be al pi their derech, but rather what we need to do is figure out how we work together and how we learn from each other and how we respect each other and give each other space in places where we disagree, but we come to some sort of modus vivendi where it works as a people. But the conflict is, right, this was ki ish echad b'lev echad, aval shar kol hachaniyos, and all of the rest of Jewish history is not that way. And I don't think it will ever be that way. I don't think it's meant to be that way. And I think it's just a little bit of a shift in perspective around how we think about unity. And it's really about figuring out how we work together, appreciate each other, so that we can have mutual respect and admiration and love. But there is no utopian moment when we all become one shevet, and that would not be a utopia.
So I was thinking about something similar, and I would take what you're saying and package it a little bit differently. I was thinking about the fact that Kisha Echad B'Lev Echad, this moment of supreme unity, apparently happened specifically at Har Sinai, at the giving of the Torah. And then I realized, but we don't know where Har Sinai is, right? Just like we don't know where Moshe is buried, even though Moshe plays such a critical role, the significance of his role is really beyond his own identity, which is why we don't know where he's buried. And so I think we can say something similar for the unity at Ma'amad Har Sinai, similar to what you're saying. That unity was a utopian moment, fitting for that moment of the giving of the Torah. But by referencing all the other encampments that were filled with machlokas, I think the ultimate lesson is that unity is as much of a goal as world peace, right? It's not something that can be achieved, and it's not meant to be the goal. The goal is that we're supposed to pursue unity. We're supposed to be constantly pursuing unity, knowing that we're never going to achieve it, because you're right. To achieve unity is also problematic. But in this world, the world in which Hashem designed for us, in which we have unique identities, and Hashem maintained the identity of the Shvatim through Shibud Mitzrayim, right? Could have just made us all Bnei Yisrael, but we're not. We're divided into Shvatim because that is the reality of the world, that we are different. And the goal should be to be constantly pursuing unity, because in that sense, you will be able to elevate machlokas and differences to machlokas l'shem shamayim, to more refined thinking and collaboration. But again, you need that within the context of conflict, right? It's just like Rodev Shalom, right? You pursue peace. You're chasing after peace because you're never going to get it. But lo alecha hamlacha ligmor, v'lo ata ben chorin li batel mimena. It's not up to you to finish the job. No one's ever going to achieve world peace. No one's ever going to achieve full unity. But you're not allowed to desist. You have to keep and constantly pursuing it. It's a habit. It's an orientation.
So I wanted to discuss this pasuk not just because of how prominently featured it is in our observance and our learning and discussion about Shavuos, but also this pasuk about unity that we read in the context of all the disunity that exists in the Jewish world now. The Jewish world is so fractured on so many levels. Israel and the diaspora, different Jewish communities in Israel, all the different denominations that are vying for a seat at the table. And I'm fascinated, Rabbi Goldberg, that you read this Rashi as a call for uniformity. I never really noticed this diuk, but like the Rashi doesn't say deya achas, one opinion or one approach or one attitude. Ki ish echad b'lev echad, I think, is actually telling us something else. And I actually want to draw that out with a thought that I heard for the first time, I believe, in the name of Rav Kook. This is probably one of the oldest Divrei Torah that I know. I heard it from my 9th grade Rebbe in high school and have remembered it ever since. Not much else I remember from 9th grade, but I do remember this. He noted that he had a very similar formulation.
Well, let's go. Let's give him a shout out. Let's go. Who's your 9th grade Rebbe?
Rabbi Avram Bakrak, Zichrono Livracha, who I owe a great deal to him. And I had the chance to see him a couple of times after I had him in high school and was able to be Makir Tov for the extent to which he taught me how to learn. Anyway,
Nice,
it was
nice.
it was really a special year.
Beautiful.
And he would share Divrei Torah every Friday, and I believe he shared this one. In Parshas Beshalach,
Yeah.
when the Egyptians are pursuing the Jews who are on the banks of the Yam Suf, Uparo Hikriv, and Paro is getting closer, and they're chasing after, and it says, Vayisu b'nei Yisrael aseinehem. B'nei Yisrael turned around with their eyes, and they saw, V'hinei Mitzrayim noseya acharehem. Not nosim, noseya. So Rashi there, on that pasuk, Rashi says about the Mitzrim, what does he say? The Mitzrim are b'leiv echad ki ish echad. That with one heart, like one person. So Rabbi Backrack, I believe in the name of Rav Kook, asked, why by Mitzrayim is it b'leiv echad ki ish echad, and by Am Yisrael it's ki ish echad b'leiv echad? Because all nations of the world, and indeed all communities, can achieve unity. But so often, the unity of the nations of the world is actually rooted in the unity of thought, the unity of opinion. We all think the same way. We all are of one mind, and therefore we have a sense of unity. We've created an echo chamber where we all agree on things, and that creates a sense of unity. What's unique to Am Yisrael among the nations of the world is that we are not a faith community, first and foremost. We are not a people who all think the same. We are Ke'ish Echad. We have unity and connection with one another, irrespective of how we think and irrespective of what we believe and how we practice. We are a family. Families are connected to one another just because they are family. And two brothers can be at each other's throats, arguing about politics, arguing about religion, arguing about whatever. But at the end of the day, they're always brothers and they'll always be connected. And that's Am Yisrael. We say first, Asher b'charbonim yikol ha'amim, and then V'nasan lanu es Toraso. The chosenness of the Jewish people is not a result of having received the Torah. It's not a result of the Leiv Echad. It's not a result of our common belief system. Even before that, there's a Bris Avos that exists before the Bris Sinai. We are a family. We're a people that are connected. It just so happened that at Sinai, we also were B'leiv Echad. But even that, I don't think it means we all agreed on everything. It means we had a unity of purpose. We had a unity of mission. We are B'leiv Echad. We're as one heart. I think what Rashi's trying to do here is establish an entity, a strand, if you will, of Am Yisrael as a self-contained unit. You and I and all of the Jewish people are not just a collection of individuals with different opinions. We are an organic whole, an organic unit, a klal of which the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And that is the precondition for Matan Torah.
I'm not sure that we're really truly disagreeing. What I was taking us towards is just that it says in the Torah that there will always be aniyim, right? Even though we're always trying to support the aniyim, we have to have the humility to recognize and not get disappointed when we find that despite our best efforts and our largesse and our giving, there always are going to be people who are going to have needs. So don't think you're going to solve this problem. And you're always managing the problem, basically, and addressing it. And it's about giving, not about resolving it. And so I guess I wanted to make that same point here, that but for these very unique, almost miraculous moments of Jewish history, there is never a time when Jewish people speak b'peh echad. We're always, it's interesting. I keep going back as you were speaking. I was going back to Migdal Bavel. That like Migdal Bavel was this moment where they were a unification around something bad, and then separated into 70 languages and dispersed around the world. And I feel like Har Sinai, we were unified around something wonderful, but then we were given like Shivim Panim LaTorah, and like almost a parallel. Now go and give expression to these 70 different aspects of the Torah. And we're always just managing the fact that we have this period around a shared sense of fraternity and family and values and Torah. But there's always going to be that tension. And so just a question, how we manage that tension and how do we preserve our civility and our sense of Ahavas Yisrael in the face of tension that almost has to be there. I guess that's what I'm trying to
It's a machlokes l'shem shamayim, sofa l'hiskayim, which is precisely this point. We don't squash dissent or difference of opinion. And not only do we not squash it, we actually, to use your cliche from before, it's a feature, not a bug.
Yeah.
We like that. What do we mean when we say the machlokes is sofa l'hiskayim? It will endure. The dispute in and of itself highlights a feature of Torah, which is Shivim Panim LaTorah.
Yeah.
We do believe the opinion of Beis Shammai is every bit as much Torah as the opinion of Beis Hillel, on which you can say Birchas Torah and with which you're fulfilling the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. and which actually conveys a value, even if it's not implemented in a normative sense in terms
Yeah.
of how we practice, all of the different elements and aspects and all the different perspectives and approaches and attitudes to Torah add to the tapestry.
Yeah. It's a little bit of a paradigm shift, just tying us back to the beginning of the discussion, which was focused on the American government. And I just also went on NORPAC, so it's also fresh in my mind. I once heard a talk from Justice Scalia, and he was talking about gridlock in
Embrace the gridlock.
Right. And that was his thing. He said it's not, he didn't use the language of it's not a bug, it's a feature, but that the whole bicameral system is meant to create gridlock, number one, so that a government can't over legislate. And also because when you have gridlock, then you produce lots of compromise and everyone has to give. And that ends up creating less legislation and the kinds of legislation that actually represents the breadth of the American people. And in the media, gridlock on Capitol Hill is the worst thing and it's wasted taxpayer. But it's not. It's not a negative, even though it's something that has a negative face to it. It serves a purpose and is something that we should embrace. And so lahavdil, but it's the constant clashing of the different machanes of the Jewish people. It brings us closer to, it gives us that tapestry. And it is a feature of being Am Yisrael. And it's an important paradigm shift, I think.
And this is central to Rabbi Sachs's argument in his book, Dignity of Difference, speaking about Migdal Bavel and how Hashem intentionally mixed up the world. He's trying to provide a recipe for how people of different backgrounds, different cultures can all live in the same city, in the same country, and have a shared identity without giving up on their unique identities. And he basically points to this very idea that this is how the world was built, this is how the Jewish people were built, of a collection of peoples who maintain a certain uniqueness in their identity, but all see themselves as a part of a shared identity. How to balance those two. It's one of my favorite books of his. The Dignity of Difference, How to Avoid the Clash of Civilizations.
Beautiful.
Fantastic.
Something to read during the entire night on Shavuos. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful,
Yeah,
wonderful
good.
Yontif.
Shom Yisrael neged ha'or Zonu kulanu ki'echad echad Vayichan Shom Yisrael neged ha'or Zonu kulanu ki'echad Echad, oy oy bilay echad, vayichan Shom Yisrael neged ha'or. Echad, oy oy bilay